To those individuals who like projects, you're welcome. I'm really glad that you're happy. To those individuals who don't like projects, I'm sorry. But Tushkadoodles, we're still doing a project. And if you don't like projects, you might like me even less when I tell you something. And that something is, I am choosing your groups this time. And you can complain, you can gripe. I get that, I can handle this. But let me explain to you the rationale to why. In your jobs, when you get out of school, most likely you're going to have to work with other people. And when you work with other people, one of two things can happen. You can choose your people, or the people are chosen for you. So here at Clarenceville, seems like any time we can choose our people, these two find each other and they giggle and they have a good time. They give each other mani-pedis. They're tight. They're good friends. And that's great. Friendship's beautiful. Brotherhood's beautiful. I love it. Sometimes in life, though, like here's a real life example. I was working with all these people during COVID. Some of these people I like very much, like Mr. Nelson. I've known him for years. We're very tight. We're cool. Some of these people I don't know. It didn't excuse me from not working with them just because I didn't know them. So I feel it's good to practice in both scenarios. So that's the reality. Now, for the project itself, you will be assigned one of these imperial powers. England, France, Spain, Portugal, the Netherlands or the Dutch, the United States, and Japan. And you will take your one nation through a set of criteria. And criterion, because criteria is plural, criterion is singular. There you go, English class. Is geography. So which nations were colonized? Geographically, how far was your nation's influence? How did this affect languages spoken on Earth? Notice I'm speaking English to you. Express this influence using maps, like this one. That's a map. I'm a map, I'm a map. For all of you kids raised on Dora, map. So part one, geography. Now part two, we're talking do-re-mi. We're talking money, economics. How do these imperial nations benefit from their imperialism in the pocketbook? We're talking money-wise. Which commodities were produced by their colonies? Big money in those commodities. Any major companies that formed around imperialism, and this big point, what aspects of mercantilism can be seen in these imperial conquests? So I'm asking you to really elucidate mercantilism in your nation and how these nations were demonstrating mercantilism. So that's part two. Part three, we're going into governance. How do these imperial powers govern their subjects? What governmental entities and policies were enacted to rule? Was the rule even-handed? Was it tyrannical? Again, when you're an imperial power, you need government to back you up, to be imperial. So we're going to be looking at three. So part one, geography. Part two, economics. Part three, government. Part four is for my bomb and bullet type people. What weapons were used by your nations to subdue colonies? Were there any major military actions that enabled imperial growth from your nation? Again, part of being an imperial power, you had to back up your power with firepower, with weapons. So part four is military. Part five is quelling resistance. And we learned in the revolution that people will rise up in time to fight against mistreatment. And this is no exception. But were there any major resistance movements against your nation in the time of imperialism? How did they subdue their colonies? Were these colonists successful or unsuccessful? So part five is about resistance. Now part six, the quote-unquote positive effects of imperialism. So what were some of the lasting legacies of imperialism that could be considered quote-unquote positive? For example, infrastructure, that kind of thing. Part seven, the negative effects of imperialism. What were some of the lasting legacies of imperialism that could be considered negative? We saw many of those yesterday in regards to imperialism in Africa. So the negative side of imperialism, two sides to every coin, right? And part eight, your final synopsis. So when you present to the group, you will end your presentation by completing this prompt. My nation's imperial story can best be summarized by, because your classmates don't know the story of your nation. So the onus is on you to tell them the story. And I'm looking for baby bear's porridge. Okay, not too eggheady, but not too simplistic. Try to find that sweet spot. Easier said than done. Okay, now your final product. You will present your findings to the class, and we're going to go in the order of the nations that appear on slide 3. Pretty arbitrary, but that's the order we're going in. Your audience are the people in this class, so make it understandable to a high school student. Present using an appropriate scale. I just said it a second ago. Baby bear's porridge. Not too hot, not too cold, just right. And my hope is that at the end of this, we can grasp the story of these imperial nations and what happened in their age of imperialism. And this is just a gratuitous picture of Mr. Morrow for those people who are angry at me. Some people aren't going to be angry at me. You didn't choose your people. You're angry at me because it's a project. You're angry at me because you have to talk in front of the class. I'm guessing there's going to be some vitriol and anger, but the best cure for vitriol and anger is Mr. Morrow. So I hope it makes you feel better. And school aside, work aside, whenever you're down, just think of Mr. Morrow eating cake, and you should feel better. Certainly works for me. All right, so I look forward to seeing what you create. I know you're going to do a great job, and I'll be here to help you every step of the way. So thank you for watching.